So welcome everyone to another community call where the first topic we have today is an exciting one in my mind. I think we're starting to get to the point where we may actually become a real business. So yeah, like one of the most important parts of being a business is you have to make money. And one way in that I think we can make money in a way that actually provides like a ton of value to the scientific community is the concept of like bounties for peer reviews. So we have like this post publication peer review feature now. And like, crypto in general, I think like bounties actually work really well. And one thing which has been pretty exciting is like on our D work, we like opened up a bunch of bounties for editors to like share peer reviews about papers. And we had a lot of like scientifically inclined individuals actually apply to like kind of like take these bounties and draft peer reviews for scientific papers. And so we're excited about this, and that like there's a problem that currently exists in science in that like peer reviewers want to be paid. This is like talking to a couple of like scientists that work at journals. They're saying that like PI level scientists are actually starting to decline peer review requests more than ever. And so like peer reviews are getting done by like grad students more than ever because like top tier scientists essentially want to be compensated for their time. I don't know if you all have seen this, but there's also a Twitter account called the $400 movement, which is run by James Heathers, who this other Twitter account's amazing. It's called Justin Mice, and it tweets out like news articles that say like, oh, running 10 miles a day like makes you live longer, but the study's actually in mice, and so it just criticizes like psychom. It's really funny, but it's run by James Heathers, who's this meta scientist, and he like is advocating for journals to pay scientists $400 per peer review. So the opportunity to have like compensated peer review, I think, is like something the scientific community is calling for. And so with our current post-publication peer review feature, we can essentially allow anyone with Research Coin to place bounties on creating peer reviews, for papers that have already been published, so post-publication. And I think like the compelling use case here is like going back to like COVID, right? Like ivermectin, there's kind of like a debate about whether it could be effective for like early treatment of like mild COVID. And there are a bunch of papers that came out that like said like, hey, like this might actually be useful. And then I don't know if you all are familiar with this, but the author of Star Slate Codex, who's a
Slate
psychiatrist,
Star Codex.
yeah, Slate Star Codex. Yep. I forget what's his name. Edwin, do you know?
God,
Like pseudonym. He got outed a little
yeah,
while.
yeah, yeah. He did
Scott
get
Alexander.
doxxed.
Scott
I
Alexander.
should Scott Alexander.
Yep, yep. And so he's like a really bright dude who knows like a lot about a lot of different topics. And so he like collected essentially like all of the biggest papers supporting like ivermectin, for the early treatment of COVID. And he basically went through each paper and like commented on the scientific validity. And I think there were something like 15 papers that like supported this idea, and like four of them were like worth listening to, and the rest were like underpowered or like run in a way where like it's tough because it was early stage clinical research. Like lots of people had lots of different treatments, and so just like the findings, you couldn't really glean a ton from them. And so yeah, it's like this like public debate about the viability of this treatment, where there had been a bunch of research papers both supporting and like negating the use of ivermectin to treat like early mild COVID. And so like one thing that we think that we could bring to the table is essentially the ability for anyone who's like interested in like, more professional criticism of these papers to put their money where their mouth is. So like say like, I'm kind of interested, like I think there might be something to this, like I could put $20, towards like incentivizing like a scientist who's got relevant knowledge to criticize the paper from like an objective perspective, like basically looking at the methodology, like looking at the findings, like do the claims that the authors, like cite at the end of their paper, actually are they justified by the results? There's a lot of ways that like smart people can look into this and like provide more context that would be important. So yeah, the way we're thinking about this, there's kind of like a bunch of different design choices. So very curious to hear what you all think. but like kind of like at the most basic level, what we want to do is empower the average person to put money towards like a professional scientist coming in and leaving a post-publication peer review about the quality of a paper. So kind of like pub peer, but structured and with people being compensated for their time. And so like some of the interesting questions here are like, should these bounties be able to be pooled? Like if me, Lynn, and Satvik are all interested in this, like, and I put $20 and Satvik puts $5 and Lynn puts like $150, like, should that all be combined to the first person to leave like a quality peer review about the paper? Or should it be individual? Where like if I put a $20 bounty, like maybe that's not enough for someone to like ever come in and actually review the paper. Maybe I actually have to put $400 in order to like, appropriately incentivize a scientist, or like the equivalent in research coin, to appropriately incentivize a scientist to come in and share their expert opinion. So yeah, that's the first design choice, is like individual bounties or collective pooled bounties. Yeah, so curious what you think. There's a bunch of other kind of aspects of this, but yeah, Lynn, what do you think?
So I think I see benefits to like having both as an option personally, because I could very much see, I think that if you only had to go with one, unfortunately, you might have to go with individual, just because I think there were people who would want to be able to post their own individual bounties. But I think that, because I personally love the idea of being able to like start a crowdsourced bounty, like put in a certain amount and be like, hey, like if other people want to see this done, let's just like put money in until somebody claims it, So I actually really like the idea of the crowdsourced bounties, but I think that both have their place.
And so I think like one piece of context here too is like this would be for the V1. So it would be like, what's the first thing we ship? And like we'll ship it, like see what works, what doesn't work. Like if like we get a lot of feedback that it's like, oh hey, people only want to put $20, but there's like 10 people who want to put $20, then that helps inform us.
Right.
Yeah, or like we might be able to go to like a big funder like the Gates Foundation, and they may be like, oh yeah, like we'll do like 100 different papers at $300 a pop, because that's what we're interested in, like trying to have happen in like the research ecosystem. So yeah, it's about thinking like, what's the first iteration of this for us to like try and use to collect data in order to inform like further iteration.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think the crowdsourcing would be kind of interesting. If somebody posts a bounty, just the ability to anybody to just like add on to it.
One thing I think in support of the crowdsource thing is like maybe there's a paper that I wouldn't put $100 bounty on, but like if Ricardo's put $20 and Edwin's put like $30, I might put $5.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I could envision myself in situations like that frequently.
Cool, Edwin.
So what's the argument for having individual bounties?
It's easier to build. It's simpler. Like in theory,
It's not a good argument.
Yeah, I think like a lot of times, like in tech products, like if it requires an instruction manual, it's too complicated. And so like we'd have to figure out like a UX where it's clear that like you can, yeah, it feels more straightforward in my mind to be like, I'm leaving a bounty, not like I'm contributing to a bounty. And then like if there's multiple people, like if we all put a bunch of bounties on it, like who gets to decide if the like peer review that's left qualifies? Because like as we've kind of seen like on our comments, like there's a range, of like quality. And so like part of this, one of the other aspects that I was going to ask about is like, how do you know when a quality peer review has been left? But yeah, I think the pooled piece could, we'd have to really think about the UI that like can make it clear that other people can add to the pot of a bounty. There's probably lots we could borrow from like GoFundMe and like experiment.com, but yeah, we'd have to, it would require a little bit more thought on our end of like exactly how we build it out.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I don't get why I don't have a sense of how difficult it is from an engineering perspective, so I can't do pros and cons. But if we're looking at it purely functionally, I think it's overwhelmingly clear that having open bounties is better than individual. In fact, I don't even see a point to individual bounties, to be honest with you. So
Interesting.
yeah.
We'll come back to this in 1 second. Nick?
Yeah.
Nick, I think you might be muted, or there could be like an audio thing.
Yeah, I can't hear you there.
Nathan?
Okay.
Hello, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, fine. Yeah, I had a question, and then I realized that your answer to Edwin's question helped me with my question. So what I was going to say first was, is the plan to make the platform use primarily fiat currency or research coin? And then I thought, okay, what is the argument for using research coin in this scenario? Wouldn't most external people using this function just want to put up $1 bounty for time that they've spent on a peer review? But actually, if you're having a crowdsourced bounty and you're looking for quality control, actually one of the features of ResearchCoin is that actually you could create a mini voting system within who the proportion of ResearchCoin that's been devoted to a certain peer review task. And then that could be the selling point of using ResearchCoin. So, for example, if I put up 5,000 ResearchCoin for a peer review, you put up 1,000, I get 5 times the votes on the quality of the outcome of the review that's been produced, and then I can say that I've got more sway when it comes to saying what the quality is. That could be one example.
So you bring up a really important point, because like one thing that's pretty interesting is like the UX of crypto is not great. Like in general, like to get ResearchCoin, like you either need to earn it, by being part of the community, or like plug into the standard crypto infrastructure. And a lot of people who might be interested, like we would be excluding a lot of people who might be interested in this if there wasn't like some kind of like, standard fiat option. Sometimes like some projects will do things where like this is a revenue generation feature, right? So like in theory, like ResearchHub will take like a percent fee for facilitating this, and will likely have a percent fee go to like the community multisig as well. So we could do something where like the fee is way lower if you use ResearchCoin than if you use USD or something like that. And then also the added benefit here is that like it's not like perfect tokenomics, but like it becomes a little bit more of a circular economy where like, Wynn has been an incredible editor, and she spent like a lot of time like creating valuable content. And so she's accrued ResearchCoin for doing that, and now has more ability to bring criticism to the papers that she's interested in criticizing. So like it makes it more compelling to provide like high quality content within the ResearchHub community, because then you earn ResearchCoin and you're able to direct like the attention of like high quality scientists to criticizing papers. So it makes ResearchCoin more valuable in a certain aspect, because you now are able to like take smart people's time and direct it towards what you're interested in having it be directed to. And so realistically, like long term, I think we should probably do both, where like there's some massive advantage for using ResearchCoin over USD, in some like certain direction or some kind of fiat. Nick? I think the audio is still messed up. Sorry. Ricardo?
Yeah, something that I was wondering is, what is so we're talking about post-publication review, right? So what is the actual like outcome that we are expecting from this post-publication review? Just like to give a comment on like what has been done, or are we also planning to kind of be able to replicate some studies if possible? Be like, hey, this doesn't add up to me. I'm not like really buying this conclusion. Why don't we find out is this is actually true? Because
Yeah.
otherwise it's just like a comment for me, because it could be a really bad comment, but it just like stays a comment. Yeah, just my opinion.
So yeah, I mean that's like the ultimate like end game that I think we'd like to get to, where like fortunately like 5 hours of researcher's time is like more affordable than like a whole research study to replicate something. But I do think like long term, like this could turn into that, where if there's demand, we get attention, we have more resources, we're able to attract someone to spend, like we could start with kind of like low investment science, where maybe it costs 10K to like replicate a study or something. But yeah, that would be something where we're providing tremendous value to the scientific ecosystem. But I think like the idea here is like the parallel to Reddit. Like, have you ever used like Reddit, like our technology, or like I really like our immunopsychiatry, which is this like study about how like changes in your, or subreddit about how changes in your immune system can change the way you think, essentially. And so like sometimes I'll see papers and I'll click into the comments immediately just to see if some smart person has shared their opinion on the quality of the paper. There's even like news articles sometimes, like the top comment will be like really important context about like the news article itself. So it's something similar to that, where like when I see an article, it says like, hey, like, ivermectin is a really viable treatment, for early COVID. The first comment could be like, yeah, like the study, like the authors, like their results do match like their conclusions, but also it's really underpowered. And like there were a couple different treatment groups, and like I give it like a 6.5 out of 10 because I'm not totally convinced, but maybe there's something here, which helps provide, I think, important context to like if somebody wanted to say ivermectin definitely, could be used for treating COVID, or ivermectin definitely can't. Like you could go to ResearchHub and see the context, Nathan?
Sorry, just following on from what you were saying. I was just thinking about when you go back to that ivermectin example. A lot of the times, I wonder whether people want to commission a peer review on claims that they've seen in the news, for example. So they might not have seen the study and said, "Can I have a peer review on this study?" But they might say, "Oh, they're saying that ivermectin is an effective treatment for COVID. Can someone who's an expert on this topic actually go and summarize their opinion on the literature for me?" And so, could you not perhaps commission literature reviews in the same way as like a peer review?
Yeah, I actually think we totally could. Like even it fits sort of with the hypothesis feature, which we haven't totally fleshed out, but we're thinking about changing this to kind of like meta studies to a certain degree. So somebody could say, hey, here's a topic that I'm interested in, like conduct a meta study, that reviews like the most relevant like primary literature on the subject. So this would be like a little bit out of the scope of what we're hoping to build here during like the next 2 weeks. But yeah, I think there's a lot of directions that this could potentially go in that are interesting. It's the peer review one is I think like nice from like it's easier to do than a full meta study. Like it's probably 5 hours of a person's time. And then it's also like kind of compelling from a marketing standpoint, where we could share it around the internet and it's like, oh, you can get paid to do a peer review. Like I think there's both sides of like the people like providing demand for those peer reviews and the scientists providing supply is there. Like people want it, and that option doesn't exist currently. Just to kind of like bring things back to the first point here, so we don't like keep things moving. When it comes to like pooled, like crowdsourced or individual bounties, does anybody feel like we should start with individual bounties, or should we definitely start with like pooled like bounties that build up with multiple people contributing?
I prefer pool.
Is it easier to start with individual than go collective?
Yes,
I'm
but
not sure. From an engineering perspective, I'm not sure.
it would be easier. But if we feel strongly that pooled is the better option, it's technically possible for us to build that. So if we want to invest our resources in that direction, we just want to like make sure that there isn't a good argument to go with individual to start.
Yeah, I don't see any reason for individual, to be honest.
it makes it more exciting to see like the bar, for example, like the progress bar, like, okay, there's like $20, there's like $50 and so on. It kind of like makes you want to invest in that study and kind of like see through. So yeah, I'm also, I agree with Edwin. I think pool is better.
It's an important point. Jennifer?
I might have missed some of what you said at the beginning of the meeting, but as far as this bounty system works, can more than one person earn the bounty if you have multiple people who chip in a peer review for the same paper? Because I think there's a lot of value in getting multiple different opinions, and if only one person gets that bounty because they're like the first one to write it, then I think that would be a negative, and that's where multiple individual bounties would be better, because I think having multiple opinions is better.
It's another important point, right? Because like if you have like a peer-reviewed paper, there's normally at least like 3 peer reviewers. Like reviewer 2 is always a pain in the butt kind of thing. So yeah, like I think there could be something where like maybe there's a maximum number of research coin for the first like peer review. Like maybe that's whatever the $400 equivalent is, and then after that, it starts to create a bounty for the second person to leave a quality peer review. Like another important part here is like who gets to decide if a peer review qualifies as quality. Like the way that DWork works is like people get assigned the task before they actually do it. And like so it could be like Ricardo applies for the bounty. And then like if it's in Lynn's hub where Lynn's the editor, Lynn looks at Ricardo's background, looks at his posting history, and is like, yeah, Ricardo, I think could do a good job and earn this bounty. And then like there's an escrow where Ricardo eventually earns it once he posts the peer review and Lynn approves it. There's another version where it's almost more like a design contest where like a bunch of people share peer reviews hoping to get the bounty. And then Lynn gets to decide which one she thinks, is like most valuable in her hub. Or like kind of as was suggested by Nathan, like the higher percentage of the bounty that you contribute, like the more influence you have over deciding which reviews qualify. To me, this is a little bit dangerous though, because like I'm a big fan of mindfulness meditation, right? And so like if I'm really interested in osteosarcoma pain, I might be less likely or less inclined to like value a peer review that rejects my opinion on something. So I think there kind of needs to be like an impartial referee to a certain extent. But I could be totally wrong there. So yeah, the thing with this feature is the design space is huge in how we could actually implement it. Like it's a little bit more complicated than even pre-publication because there's like a solid like playbook there. So yeah, we could literally do anything. And it's about, I think, creating a first version that like we can use to collect data on how to improve it over time. But Jennifer, you're absolutely right, where like one peer review is not enough. Like there needs to be 2. And we could like do something where maybe even like the community fund matches, if like after the first $400 worth of research coin is hit, then like the community fund like 1-to-1 matches any research coin after that for the second peer review. Like there's a lot of different cool things that we could do. Nathan?
I really like your idea of a design contest type format, and also any kind of design type contest format for designs of how you decide who gets to do a peer review and claim the bounty. Because I think the issue with the current system, let's just take DWork for example, is that it always incentivizes the person who's willing to do it for the least amount. Because let's say that you're adding the total of how much you're willing to pay for a certain article's peer review. When it gets to, let's say, a grad student who's, on their PhD stipend and wants to make some quick money, they will quickly accept that bounty and do the peer review for it. But let's say I'm an established professor, I've got a salary, I've got a lot of time commitments. This is interesting to me, but if the bounty is going to be interesting to me, it's got to be a lot higher than that person. We shouldn't necessarily be saying that we want to exclude the professor just because their 2 opinions are theoretically not in a way that their opinions are worth different amounts. And so maybe, one solution could be that a professor could reverse bounty and say, this is what I'm willing to do it for, if people can support me at this level. Or, you know, the design contest idea, again, is another way of incentivizing that.
I think another piece of this that's important to remember too is like, this is a bonus. Like in theory, if you share a high quality peer review, like it'll probably attract upvotes. And so you're going to be earning research coin just for creating high value content anyway. So like if we go in the, you know, design contest perspective, like, and there's like a bunch of people who are interested in seeing a high quality peer review, like there will be a lot of eyes on the paper, a lot of upvotes to go around to people who like share quality peer reviews. And then maybe only the top 1 or 2, as decided by the editor of that hub, actually receive the bounty or something. So yeah, again, like the design space is gigantic here. And like, yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot and I have no idea what the right answer is. So I think we'll probably, yeah, we'll probably iterate a lot on it, but I think it's pretty exciting.
So, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm the only one with my heads up. Well, so other than the point that Jennifer brought up, which is, you know, how to make sure you have multiple reviews and having, you know, individual bounties be a part of that. What are some of the other arguments for individual bounties?
I think the most compelling one is that it's easier to explain. And like, it could be just a first good step. But even what Ricardo's saying, like, I totally get it, where it's like when you go to GoFundMe, like the things that get funded the most are the ones that are like getting funded the most. You know, there's kind of like this exponential thing where like you want to hop on the cool thing that other people think is cool. So but yeah, I think there's a lot of value there just to like kind of get that like social excitement going. Nick?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. Sorry, I may have missed the past 5 minutes. I was restarting my computer. But I just wanted to say that I think the idea of multiple people hopping on the same bounty is great, especially if those people are displayed as separate users on the bounty. Because I would think for somebody trying to, or thinking of doing a peer review, 5 people offering a bounty of 20 research coin would be far more compelling than 1 person offering like 100. So having that list, I think, would help kind of get that momentum going as far as, you know, interacting between people, which is what ResearchHub is looking to do, and kind of getting away from just the RSC balance and that being the only driver of that.
I mean, it's a great point. And there's also like a certain part of this where it should probably be in your user profile too. So that way, when I go to Nick's profile, I can see like, oh, you know, Nick has spent money caring about like these topics and like wants to learn more about this stuff. He's supported like people like, you know, validating research. And so, yeah, totally the social aspect here is super important. Yeah, it's a great point. So I guess like, but just to make sure that we nail this down for sure, does anyone here have like a positive thought when it comes to individual bounties, or should we definitely start with pooled? Sapik?
Yeah, so in support of individual bounties, my sort of initial assessment is this, that it might be easier to get it rolling. So of course, from an engineering perspective, it's easier to build it. And then from sort of a sales perspective, it's easier to get one rich person to pay $200 than it is to get like 10 people to pay $20, right? So it might help to sort of get it rolling. And then, of course, I get that the people who are interested in it should have sort of a way to contribute to it. And for that, we could have something similar to what we have right now with the pot of code. So where authors can sort of claim their paper and get all the RSC from the upvotes. Maybe everyone who's interested in sort of one review can upvote that review, and then whoever claims it gets the $200 that the original sort of person had put in there, and then also a pot of gold from the support there. That's my my point.
I actually like that a lot because it kind of reminds me a little bit of like our initial thought of like the Rotten Tomatoes review, where you have like the expert review and then like the like, you know, audience review, where maybe like the peer review that the editor decided, you know, deserves a bounty isn't the one that's most popular, you know, among the users. Again, I think like we need to have some kind of weighted upvote here where like experts in the field like are their opinion of a review is probably more qualified than just like the average person. So there needs to be like some, in my mind at least, there needs to be some element of like weighted reputation per hub, and we don't have that yet. But I do love the idea of like, you can see, what's like the populist, view versus like what does the editor team, within that hub like think is actually quality. And I think there's important context there for sure. Okay, cool. So I guess like, does anybody else have a positive view of individual bounties before we move on? Nathan?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find a reason, like sort of playing devil's advocate. One thing is obviously this feature involves people investing in an idea, and with that comes the trust of the people who are involved, especially if they're external users and not core users to ResearchHub. It's probably a lot easier to manage if there are bugs and things don't quite work out the way you are, if it's a one-to-one peer reviewer to supporter ratio. And so if you aren't 100% confident in the robustness of the back end, maybe starting out with one-to-one is a good way of easing into it. And then when you're confident that works, expand it to, okay, a max of 10 and then a max of 100. What you don't want is start with 10,000. They all lose their money. It gets
Right.
bad publicity, and you just force it from the beginning.
Totally. It's a great point. And I think like we're trying to ship this within the next 2 weeks. So like all of these kind of design decisions will be made within that context of like, we want to ship something that works. And like our goal is to produce $1 revenue by like not this Friday, but the next Friday. So yeah, that'll be up to Kobe and Pat and our engineering team in order to like make that like, risk reward decision of what can we build within 2 weeks that works, that isn't going to break, that we can get that $1 revenue from in order to start being a real business. Cool. Yeah. So I think we can move. I think we've got a lot of good feedback, and like, it seems like pooled is definitely like the preferred option here. So like, I'll report back once I sync up with like Kobe and Pat and see what we think we can build within 2 weeks. So the next important question here is like, who's deciding if a peer review, is quality? Like, it is, I guess like the more important part here is like, are we going design contest, or is it something where I apply to be able to share a peer review, and there's some kind of judgment before like time is spent writing the peer review to like make sure only people with the appropriate like knowledge about the paper would actually review it?
Wait, to make sure only the people with the appropriate knowledge review, or would review a review?
Like, is it D-Work style where people apply to collect the bounty, and then the editor decides, yes, like Edwin, he's got the background that's appropriate, like he gets the first shot, and then you share it, and then it's approved, and then you collect the bounty? Or is it like I share a bounty, and then Edwin, Nick, and Sadvik all write peer reviews, and then Ricardo's like, oh yeah, Nick's is the most quality. Like, this is actually relevant. It's like the best, like criticism of the paper, most fair. And we give the editor the power to determine like what, which peer review fulfills the bounty the best.
I would definitely go for the second one. Like, in my opinion, that in that way, you create interaction under the post. So instead of having just one comment, you get like, I don't know, like 5 different people actually doing the review. You can kind of like get also like cross comments, like people commenting under like the review and so on. And in that way, you're not kind of like excluding someone before they actually give their opinion on that. And then you can just like judge the comment based on the quality of the comment itself. I don't know if I got that wrong. If it's just like,
doesn't that just add a lot of risk to doing that work though? Because you put a bunch of time into it and then you just don't get paid for it. That devalues it substantially in my mind, the bounty.
I think with the context of, you can still get upvotes. So yeah. like you wouldn't get the bounty. There is risk in that you might not get the bounty, but you will if you create something of value and other people perceive it as valuable. Like with our new reward structure, you could still be, like relatively handsomely compensated for your time.
Yeah, like
if you could tweak perhaps, because we're talking about how reputation scores will affect the percentage of research coin that goes to your wallet. So if people who do those and they're not like complete, or I don't know, maybe likes from that can lead to a disproportionate value accrual in some way that I'm not thinking about right now. But I would say that taking the time to your upside when you take the time to do something like a peer review should be higher than your upside for commenting on a paper, and because that's just more work. So you have to find a way to account for that value. And I think if you make it somewhat more deterministic, there's less risk associated with it. So people who may not have that much time to put in just to see what happens would still feel like, okay, this is something that's worth doing. So I would consider that.
Maybe there's a third option here where the editor is responsible for saying which submissions are eligible to receive the bounty, and then it's done by votes after that. So basically just screening out the low quality ones, and then you let the community decide, like which one receives the most upvotes. Just a thought. That's a little bit more complex.
But no. Well, one thing, but if you're doing that kind of defeats the purpose, right? Because the purpose of the researcher choosing who does the bounty based on evaluating their background or whatever is to screen for expertise. So I don't understand why you would do that and then have the community who presumably does not have the expertise decide which peer review gets the value. That doesn't make sense to me.
I guess my thought is like our early community, it probably wouldn't work at scale, but our early community, I feel like everybody here, the incentives are aligned, and we're all scientists, and we kind of know, like you can look at a peer review and you kind of know if it's like pretty good or not, Joanna, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, adding on Edwin's thoughts to reduce the risk. I mean, maybe we can start with a fixed reward for a peer review, and then the editor can delegate on other rewards.
I think that makes the most sense to me because I feel like our editors are awesome, and like it feels simple, and like we could have people hate on us and then we can change it, but that feels like a good way to get started. That's like simple. It makes enough sense, and that's kind of what editors do at a real journal anyway. So it's kind of close. Jennifer?
I guess going back to something Edwin said about, I think you were talking about expert versus community and feedback on peer reviews as to who gets, why community members would even really have much of a say. I guess one thing is that sometimes certain comments are easier to understand for someone who's maybe not an expert, and I think that's very valuable if it's being communicated in a way that someone who doesn't have the background to understand the paper can understand the comment and get some insights and understanding as to what's going on. And then in that way, I think there's value to getting community input.
Well, that's an important point where you almost incentivize the peer reviewer to phrase things without jargon. Like you can still, be technically excellent, but just choose to use phrasing that will resonate with the average person more so than other experts in the field. That's a super good point. That's definitely something we need to think about. Nick?
So I was just thinking about the situation where, let's say someone puts up a bounty of like 1,000 RSC and there's 3 or 4 excellent peer reviews. There's one that's better than the others, but the others are really good in their own. What would be kind of neat, I think, is if there was like if you put up 1,000 RSC, there's a % of that that's also held in escrow for other reviews, which are good in their own right, but possibly not the best one. Because I worry about somebody maybe having their first foray into the peer review. They write a really great one, but it's not the best, and then they get nothing for it, and they might be de-incentivized to do that in the future. But maybe like a little kind of lower value, but they still get something for their time could help kind of keep that going.
Yeah, totally. 'Cause especially if it's like a new person to the platform and they spend time, they don't get it. So I'm thinking here, like the MVP solution is like if like Ricardo and Joanna both share like really quality peer reviews, but only one is selected by the editor, I'll come in and support them with the same as the bounty. So like we can manually make sure that the person who shared the other quality peer review, even if they didn't earn the bounty, they still got compensated like they did, and then like long term we can, like kind of iron out the wrinkles, but we can manually make sure like if people are spending time, creating quality content, we can make sure that they earn value for doing so in like kind of a manual perspective. But yeah, it's a great point where we don't want to like have someone spend 5 hours working on a piece of content and then like not get anything for it. That's hopefully
I also think. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I know we've talked about this before, but a lot of these things, the solution space gets broader once we include NFTs, right?
Totally.
And so I just wondered about the extent to which delaying implementing NFTs is like a good idea. Yeah, that's there's just a lot that we could be doing with that.
We're thinking about it, and we actually had like a pretty long discussion today during our engineering sync about it, because like we're thinking about a revenue model, right? And one of the choices is NFTs, because that's like a pretty popular, like Web3 way to make money. Like there's a lot of like validated business models around NFTs that make a lot of sense. The tough thing is like we probably couldn't do it in 2 weeks and have it make sense. Like there's a lot to think through, especially when it comes to like actually generating revenue from it. Like we could help people mint NFTs along with their comments and stuff like that, but like the only real revenue generation there for us is like a percentage of future trades, and then that creates a bunch of weird incentives where like you want to create an NFT that gets traded a lot, not necessarily one that people want to hold on to, which who knows what that is. So it's tricky. It's really tricky, and like I think we'd have to get it right. So yeah, to me, NFTs are high risk, high reward. And this is something where we can like, I'm pretty sure this is valuable. Like this is like, I see the use case, and like, I think we could convince scientists that it is valuable, and like scientists want to get paid for peer review. So this sort of feels like, in 2 weeks it feels safer. And like, yeah, the use case just makes sense. Yeah, but NFTs are definitely on the radar. I think that's the like the great white whale that we want to get to eventually. But like, yeah, I think like we're gonna think through it and make sure we do it right, hopefully. Yeah, so I guess like it seems like the design contest style where the editor picks a winner, and maybe there's two after a certain level bounty, maybe the max of $400 or whatever, like people can still add bounties to it, and then maybe that goes to the second one, and we just make sure ResearchHub compensates anyone who produces high quality peer reviews of a paper no matter what. Does that sound right? Does anybody disagree? I guess Ricardo first, and then
Oh yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure that it was still like a contest. So basically you have like a bunch of people actually like posting the review and you select the best. Because something that I was thinking about is if you select the reviewer before, you kind of like get into the same problem that we're facing now with like traditional peer reviews, that you got like crappy reviews and you can do like nothing about it because you already selected the reviewer. So I think that is where we want to innovate. So we allow everyone to get into the competition, let's say, of peer review, and then we kind of like select the best, but we still reward those that have did a good job.
And Ricardo, you're like spot on, where like unfortunately in social media, like the thing that attracts the most attention is like disagreement and controversy, right? And so like there's something really cool where like I'm an author, I shared a paper, somebody put $400 for bounty to peer review my paper, and then one person comes in, tears my paper apart, another person comes in and says, this is okay. Like I can respond to the first person, right? Like if it's an unfair peer review, like I can say, hey, like I get what you're saying, but like I, respectfully disagree. And then the editor can see the context there and be like, oh, this author actually kind of has a point. But you can have that discussion, which is like so compelling, I think.
That kind of reminds me of like when you leave like reviews on TripAdvisor and you actually see the people from the restaurant that actually reply, like, hey, like it didn't go like as you said. So like, well, what are you saying? Like it didn't go that way. Yeah, that totally makes sense to me.
Totally. Yeah, and like in that situation, it's a little he said, she said, and in this situation, it's all in the paper. right? So it's like any person, you know, I wasn't there when I didn't pay my hotel bill and the guy got angry at me, right? But like, you know, anybody can look at the paper and see if the criticism is, you know, they were there for the security footage that saw me not pay my hotel bill, and they can, you know if the criticism is valid or not. Sepik?
Yeah, my point was regarding potentially wasting someone's time. Right. So one of the ideas that I had was, could there be sort of a version-based feature for this, where people post sort of the very first draft of their peer review and then build upon it, and then they can be stopped in the initial versions if sort of the community or the editors think that their sort of contribution would not be that meaningful. Could there be some way of that, so that nobody has to spend like 6 hours on something and then have it rejected? Could there be something like that?
Yeah, so I think you're getting to the thing that we're most excited about long term, which is like pre-publication peer reviews and the ability to have version control for all content on ResearchHub, where like, yeah, like I think the most applicable use of this is I share a preprint, I get a peer review, I now have a version 2 of my paper, I get another peer review, I now have a version 3, I get another, it's accepted, boom, peer reviewed, you know, just like a standard journal process. But then we could also do that for the peer reviews themselves, you know, where like maybe, you know, somebody like is like a grad student or something and tries to share a peer review, but they miss like an important part, and then they come back with V2 of their peer review, and like it can be an educational experience where they like get, you know, like a constructive feedback on their peer review, and like, you know, like from that become better over time. And I think that's like super compelling, especially when it comes to like breaking down the ivory tower and like giving anyone the opportunity to like learn from and participate in science. So yeah, that's where we want to be long term. And I think this is going to get us there, like over the course of 6 months or so. So we'll see, but that's definitely what we're thinking of long term. Nick?
So I just wanted to bring up a point I just realized. So if I'm submitting a paper for publication in a journal and it's reviewed by reviewers, they don't see each other's review. Whereas on ResearchHub, if I'm going to peer review a paper, I'm able to see what the previous peer reviewer has put. So that is a little dangerous as far as the second person taking all of those ideas. And then if they only have 3 or 4 novel of their own, there could be something. I'm wondering if there could be like some sort of blinding system where if you want to be a peer reviewer, you can see that people have peer reviewed it, but you can't see what they said, or just the vulnerability of somebody else coming in and stealing all of my ideas and then putting their 2 novel, and now all of a sudden they have far more just because of that.
Yeah, there's definitely something to that for sure. And I think like this makes me think of the pre-publication flow, where we'd actually have editors invite people to peer review. And maybe if you're going through that flow, you show up in a blinded fashion, where like maybe you don't even come to ResearchHub, we send you the PDF, you know, you do it outside of ResearchHub, and that, you know, page for whatever reason is blocked for you. It's a great point. And I think like for this version, like the way that I think about this is like the first time that happens, then it'll be clear to us we need to fix it, you know. But
Yeah,
like
fair
it'll happen once, and then we'll be like, okay, yeah, we need to do something here. Yeah, but it's a great point, because like people will definitely get biased, and hopefully we'll have timestamps too, so we'd be able to like kind of like point to like somebody who said something first in theory.
Definitely. Cool.
Nathan, and then I want to get to the last piece here that I think is interesting to figure out.
Yeah, sure. I'll be really quick. I was just trying to think of how we integrate the design context idea with facilitating multidisciplinary peer review. Because, I mean, my idea, like my utopia for peer review would be if a statistician could come in and say, I'm going to look at the stats in this paper. And then a computer scientist could say, well, I'm looking at the computer science aspect. And you know, the biologist or whatever looks at the real basic science core aspect, and really that none of those individuals could come up with the best peer review, but together they could obviously come up with the best peer review. And maybe they team up before they make the peer review, like, you know, our editors have done in the past, and then submit a joint peer review to win the prize. But
But I feel like the best version of ResearchHub is when people who don't even know each other would somehow team up just based on a spontaneous interest in a paper. So I don't know how we facilitate that.
Yeah, so that's really compelling. Like I think there's two ways to do this. Like we were kind of talking about during like the previous two community calls, where our peer review feature right now is sort of just an empty field, right? Where like you can kind of peer review however you want. But I think we're going to get to the point where it's like categories, right? And it's like, was the statistical methodology like chosen appropriately and like executed properly, right? And then like, was the like actual methodology for the paper, like, does it like, was it, high quality enough to support the author's claims? Like there's a lot of different categories there. And I think like our like mandate here is to do something to make money. And I think like if there's demand, like we're gonna work on this feature a lot. And like the interesting thing that you said is like, does it happen in chunks, or do they get together beforehand? Like, do we connect people to become like a review team where it's like you've got, like you recruit a statistician to come to your like ELN, organization, and it's like, hey, we're reviewing this paper this week. Like, join our Google Meets. We're going to talk about it, and then assign, different tasks, and then we publish it together with everyone as a co-author, and we all earn the bounty in different ways. Like that's really cool because that's like very social, and I think our ELN like actually fits that pretty well. It's very compelling. So that's a great idea. I think we should definitely do something like that. And assuming we're able to get some people to like want to spend money, like creating peer review bounties, like it will become a huge focus for our team, and we'll make it super robust and like try and do whatever we can to make it attractive for scientists to want to come in, and networking is like a big piece of that for sure. Okay, cool. Yeah. So the last piece here with the last 5 minutes is like, in theory, this is revenue generation, right? So the way that I'm kind of thinking about this is like, we're already in gravy territory for scientists, because right now, like when you write a peer review, it's kind of like a professional obligation. You're doing labor for a for-profit company, almost like because it's a guilt trip. Like you have to kind of, like we're like more delicately put than that, but like that's the essence of it. And so like in theory, ResearchHub, will be able to create revenue from this, and like we'll be able to like grow as an organization. And so like the most obvious way to do that is like a fee. Questions here is, what does that fee look like? Like, what's the size of the fee? Is it 50%? Is it 25%? Is it 10%? Is it 5%? And then how much of that goes to ResearchHub Inc. and how much of it goes to the community multisig? Because I do think that like one thing that I actually have a lot of respect for scientists about, don't love for-profit companies generally. And so like I think it's important that like if I'm gonna be spending money to help create a peer review, like a portion of it is returned to the community. Like it's like, it makes me want to spend more money, right? If I know like a portion of it's going back to help like, create more content or like support the people who are most active within the community. And so like I have like a little bit of an idea, like if you look at like GoFundMe, like they have a percentage they take, of donations. If you look at Patreon, they have a percentage, experiment.com. And so what makes sense to you all when it comes to like, what's ResearchHub Inc.'s cut that ends up going to profit? And then what is the tax that goes to the community, in order to be like reinvested in any way the community wants it to be? Is Edwin?
I'm not sure. Do we need a tax going to the community? Because if they're taking money and buying research coin, they're already like increasing the price of the token. So, I mean, I don't know. Do we actually need, a substantial amount of that money going to the community? I just, the food for thought out there is to understand that with each purchase, these people are, decreasing the supply of research coin, and that's good for us. So.
It's true. And so one piece of this too is like we're really lucky to have Jeff around because he's provided some like really valuable criticism when it comes to our tokenomics. And like one issue here is like if I'm a scientist and am I doing the peer review to get more research coin to then like put bounties on peer reviews for other papers? To a certain degree, yes, but also I think most people probably want to go get dinner after work, right? Like they'll want to sell it. You know, maybe not 100% of it, but like it doesn't totally solve the problem because there has to be a way that like research coin gets taken out of circulation to actually, you know, decrease the supply. And so one thing that ResearchHub Inc. can't do is burn tokens, but the community might want to vote to send it to a null wallet, you know, like who knows, you know? So like having a certain portion go to the community provides flexibility where maybe the community wants to invest it, you know, in scientists who like, you know, want to conduct their own experiments, or maybe they want to send it to a null wallet, or who knows, like eventually, like
Why can't you guys burn it again? I'm confused.
it's a securities risk. We can't unilaterally do that. At least my current understanding. So like who knows? It might be different next year. Like no one knows. It's something that we're currently advised not to do. So yeah, and even I think like eventually, you know, we have I believe it's like 12 years worth of research coin like set out to the community, you know, in order to like be distributed. But like eventually we're going to have to mint new tokens in order to replenish that pot. But that could be significantly spread out if there's actually revenue going into the community. Like maybe like if you know certain percentages going back into the community multi-sig, maybe that all of a sudden becomes instead of 12 years, it's 14 years, right? And like everyone gets diluted less when that eventually happens. So yeah, to me, I hear what you're saying, Edwin, where like we definitely don't have to have some go back to the community, but like it feels like it becomes more palatable to spend money when it is. And like I think there's interesting things that could be done through community vote that ResearchHub Inc. can't do. So yeah. Any other thoughts, Nathan?
Yeah, so I guess the question of what the fee should be, how big should it be, what percentage are we looking at? I think it will be viewed in the context of what is someone getting from ResearchHub Inc. for using their website. Like, why can't I just use a D work for peer review? Why can't I just post, this is what I'm willing to pay for this peer review, and we can post it on Twitter? Like, do you know what I mean? And so I guess part of it is security, and that's why I think that will be really important, that like these you know contributions will need to be safe and honored, and people will have to feel like their funds are not at risk, because that's part of the value add. But then obviously the UX design is what the engineers' time has been going into, which is what this revenue is trying to pay for. But I think it would be worth even just thinking about, okay, how do we market that value add to people who are using the site for the first time as a justification for their fee? Because I feel like Patreon and, you know, well, Patreon in particular, but maybe just, you know, all the other crowdfunding sites to some extent get this criticism of like, if we're the ones doing this, what is the justification other than building a website that has justified this fee on the back end?
It's a great point. I think that this is something where there's a lot of room for criticism. And that's why we're talking about it, really, because it should be like a community decision to a certain degree. And like we don't want to do something that like, you know, doesn't feel good to the early supporters of ResearchHub. So the other piece of this too that I think is important to like keep in mind is like there's this like cognitive thing where people like to be like given stuff. They don't like to have stuff taken away from them. So I think like for the first iteration of the fee, it's better to start high and come down than it is to start low and go up. So, you know, just because like, yeah, it just feels bad. Like, okay, we started at 5%, but it really needs to be 8, you know, but it feels better if it's like we started out like 10%, but it really needs to be 8. And so, yeah, there's a piece of that too, where like, we have no idea what the demand will be. Like, this is very much just throwing darts at a wall. Like, we don't, yeah. and like hopefully like we'll be a public company someday, and like people will be able to see, you know, if we're making the same profit margin as like, you know, Elsevier, like that's not ideal. So like, yeah, I think it's something that will be tweaked, you know, over time based on what actually happens. Yeah, so does anybody have numbers they want to throw out? Like I can say what I'm thinking, you know, if that makes sense to just like ground the conversation. But yeah, if anybody has like any first thoughts, you know, let me know. Jennifer says 10%. And then Jennifer, would that be 10% to ResearchHub, or is that like a ResearchHub Inc., or is that like 5% to ResearchHub Inc. and 5% to the community, or is it 8% to ResearchHub Inc. and 2% to the community? Like, what does that look like to you?
I was thinking a total of 10% cut, and I hadn't thought about the division. I would guess, yeah, I don't know. But I would say 10% just would be, I would feel comfortable with that being a cut that's not going directly to the peer review.
Fair. Anybody else have any ideas?
If it's 10%, what are we thinking the floor will be?
You mean like long term?
No, not long term. Are we gonna, if we're putting bounties, are we gonna have like there should be an amount like we were talking about where the, you know, it's at least 400, the equivalent of $400 or something like that. So my point is, if we're doing 10%, are we just going to do it 10% of whatever, or are we going to set a floor for what a bounty floor for what the peer review is?
Yeah, I think would just to be simple, it'd probably be like if somebody wanted to complete the bounty for like, you know, the $40 equivalent of research coin, then the fee would be $4.
Okay.
You know, at 400 it would be 40, that kind of thing. If 10% was the number we wanted to start with. Nathan?
Okay.
Are you set on a percentage amount, or so I'm now thinking of like index fund providers, like could you have a flat fee, or, you know, a tiny percent but a higher flat fee, so that okay, per post it's worth it, but we're not going to gouge 10% if like 10,000 people come together to support a peer review topic, because, you know, is that really justified? Is that percentage justified by the UI design that so many people came together? Maybe not. Do you know what I mean? Because what you're doing is then discouraging people from marketing it themselves to drive. It's almost like you're doing marketing for ResearchHub Inc. at that point rather than your own peer review. You know?
It's a great point. Like this is just the first kind of form. I think it could literally be anything, and like hopefully, you know, like just for us to be supported as a company, hopefully like over the next year or two, it'll be enough to cover our burn. But yeah, anything past that, you know, I think we can be really creative with it. There's even like what you reminded me of is like maybe like it's if under 400, you know, ResearchHub Inc. gets all the 10%, but then if it's like 1,000, it becomes 50-50. And then if it's like 10,000, ResearchHub Inc. gets 2% and the community gets the other 8. You know, it's like as more goes to the community. Like there's, yeah, we can get creative with it. And I think we'll probably experiment with different things to see what is the most compelling. But yeah, it's a great point. We could literally do anything. So if anybody has any suggestions, like feel free to DM me or like post in the community, you know, chat, because yeah, we could do anything, and we'll probably try a bunch of different stuff to see what sticks. Topics?
Yeah. Would it make sense to keep a very low fee, but then sell sort of a premium account for people who want to do this? So maybe a monthly fee maybe a monthly fee for people who want to sort of put up these boundaries, and then we take a very small fee out of it. Would this be a model that we go?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Like kind of like subscription models, I think are pretty popular. And yeah, so maybe, yeah, like even maybe you need to like stake coins in order to peer review or something like that. Yeah, again, like the design space is gigantic, and like our biggest concern is like trying to cover our burn, you know, to be sustainable as a company. And then after that, like I don't know. Like I think there's other cooler things we could provide in order to try and make a whole bunch of money. I don't think peer review is the one that we would want to like make a whole bunch of money off of. So yeah, I think the design space is huge. And I guess like just to add context, like in my mind, 8% was what I was thinking, because that's what experiment.com does. That's what like I'm pretty sure Patreon does 8%. And so one other thing that happens here is like they use payment providers. And so payment providers typically take like 2 or 3%. So like of that 8%, like 5% goes to Patreon. So like if we have ResearchCoin, like we could maybe do something where it's like 8% for ResearchCoin, where 3% goes to the community, ResearchHub takes home 5%. But if you want to use USD, it's going to be 12%, you know, where 3% like, you know, gets emitted to the community and ResearchHub takes home the dollars or something. Like there's a lot of different things, but like in my mind, 8% was like the kind of like standard when it comes to like crowdfunding websites. So I think it would make sense to start with 10% and then move it down if we need to, or like, you know, 10% with 3% going to the community. Yeah, like something like that. But that's 8%, I think, is the standard for like not late stage companies, but like mature companies that are like, you know, are, I don't know if Patreon's actually profitable or GoFundMe. I'd have to look into that. But that's, I know experiment.com is like kind of sustainable and they do it at 8%, but they're also very small. I think it's like 2 people. Cool. Yeah, so we're about 10 minutes over now, and there were a bunch of other topics that we'll have to talk about next week. But like this to me is extremely exciting because I think the peer review thing is cool, and we've gotten a lot of like very good peer reviews so far from our community. So I know like we have the talent here for people like already here, like finding people who want to spend bounties is going to be easy because we already have demonstrated that we have the ability to provide like high quality peer reviews of papers. And so I think that this is going to work, and it's pretty exciting because of that, especially if it comes with like no potential sustainability, you know, in 6 months, 12 months, something like that. So yeah, I guess any final thoughts on this topic? Again, like it's something we'll be working on for a while. So yeah, as we build it, like feel free to DM me or post in the community chat or DM Kobe and Pat, who are going to be like leading the development of it. Cool.
Yeah, sounds great. I'm very excited to see it.
Yeah, thanks everybody for the opinions, and then we'll catch up on all the other topics next week too. So yeah, thanks for staying over too. It's great to see everybody again.
Bye.
See you later.
Thanks, guys.